Tuesday morning, FH&P, Tuesday morning law talk with Dylan Switzer. Sir, let's start out with the phraseology that I learned from you a long time ago, strata from hell. What is it about organizations that pick a president of a strata, and there's a couple of attendant individuals that become a part of the strata organization? You give them a little bit of power, and suddenly they make everybody's life miserable.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think it just comes down to putting more people in small spaces. You know, you have people that come from all walks of life that are in a strata. Not everybody sees the world through the same lens.
Interesting. That's a whole new perspective. Is your optics, the glasses that you're looking at life through?
Oh, absolutely. Some people relish the opportunity to be a bit of a bully. Some people are legitimately just doing the absolute best they can. I would like to think that is most people out there, but that doesn't mean their viewpoint is the same as 6 out of 10 people down the hall.
Or when I buy my unit in the strata, and maybe it's 57 units. They're freestanding within the contiguous boundary of the strata. There's a fence around us. There's a gate and whatever. But when I came in, I thought that I was going to be able to paint my front door red, my garage door purple. And I wanted gold accent trims on the downspouts and the eaves troughs, because I think that looks really good.
Well, and I'm not going to question your taste, but I will assure you that some of your neighbors probably won't agree. And that's right. And people have to ask themselves that if they want to buy or move into a strata, whether A, they're going to play by the rules, and B, if it's right for them.
Somehow I think people think that the rules don't really apply, that they're really not carved in stone, and that once they get in there, that it'll be okay.
And that's where it comes down to the organization of the Strata Council and the Strata Corporation itself, maybe the Strata Management Company, because people do get let off the hook lots in buildings, which, you know, I think that there always should be a certain flexibility in the rule. But if you start looking the other way too much, then chaos occurs, and people start getting their noses out of joint.
Because you did it for them, and they broke the rules. Thereby, what are you doing? Imposing the rules upon me and taking a hard and fast position with the small change that I want to make.
Oh, absolutely. You know, yeah, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and all those sayings, right? And you know, it could be as simple as, you know, using a deep fryer on a balcony or using a barbecue that's been recently outlawed. You know, some people say, well, I'm a responsible barbecue user, so why should I suffer by a bylaw designed to keep fires from occurring? And, you know, just because somebody else isn't diligent enough to put out a fire or use a barbecue appropriately.
Never mind. The guy on the deck, one flight down, one floor below me, he barbecues all the time. He loves to char-broil his steaks. He sends up clouds of smoke that come drifting up by one floor, roll in over my balcony, and I have to have that door closed so many nights when it's a beautiful summer's night, and I would love to have my balcony door open, but because of the guy down below charring his steaks, I can't enjoy my unit the way that I believe I'm entitled to.
And that's right. And, you know, quite frankly, that could be on him or, you know, hey, it might be on you. You might be a little sensitive going into the strata complex, you know, just because he likes his steaks for whatever reason, well done. He might be entitled to do that. Now, he's not allowed to interfere with your use and enjoyment, but that's the problem with the law. When you get into those subjective areas, you know, what does use and enjoyment mean? You know, like it means something different to every other person.
No, you know what? The clouds of smoke that came rolling up over the balcony were enough to cause me to gag and choke, and I'm going to the strata. So we're going to talk about those kinds of human challenges and how to diffuse it, I guess. And do you gently go and knock on your neighbor's door one flight down and talk to him directly, or do you go straight to the strata?
Well, I'm always a firm believer in having an adult-to-adult conversation. You're trying to keep these relationships alive. Whether you like it or lump it, you're going to be stuck with these people for the duration of your respective ownership. And if you start off just going right to the Strata Council, that's drawing a line in the sand probably. Now, if you're not comfortable or if the person's a brute, then you've got to do it. But otherwise, go down there, try to explain your situation, and then if you don't get anywhere, then fall back on the tools that you have.
Might be as simple as shifting the barbecue to the other end of the balcony where it's not directly below your sliding glass door one flight up.
Yeah, simple as that, absolutely.
Well, okay. So, are there areas these days that are sort of becoming flashpoints, that are becoming pivotal, that are, I mean, quite frankly, to me, the number one would be probably people who smoke on their balconies and stratas that are basically outlawing smoking on balconies. If you're going to smoke, you got to. And some stratas say you can't even smoke inside your unit anymore. That you have to go across the street and smoke on the sidewalk on the other side of the street.
Yeah, smoking is a big one, and I think it tracks the news. If you look back to how hot our spring was this year and all the fires in Fort McMurray, everybody had fire on the brain. We thought we were going to be in for another huge summer of fire in Kelowna, which thankfully hasn't happened. But the amount of emails and complaints that have been generated from fire hazard, whether that's smoking, but I'm thinking more about barbecues, deep fryers, things like that either create the odors and the smoke and the smell, but also create the safety hazard. I don't know if that's unique to the Okanagan, but we get a lot of that these days.
Right, and you're dealing with it.
Yeah, that's right. And so we have lots of strata councils trying to put in the bylaws prohibitions or regulations on the use of those things. And historically, that's never been part of what you would call a standard bylaw package. It doesn't matter maybe as much in Vancouver as it matters in Kelowna. We just have more fire sensitivity here, I think. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is something that lots of lawyers are drafting these days for sure.
Or just how people's vision of things have changed. I mean, I think that you, on the walk-in, you kind of put a context to it. Is that my optics and the glasses that I look through see things one way because of how I've lived my life, and my next door neighbor or the guy below me or the guy above me has a totally different set of optics and totally different set of lifetime experience, which totally redefines whether or not my lifestyle on the balcony and his lifestyle on his balcony are going to come into conflict.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I keep on coming back to sort of the barbecue one, because people latch on to that, again, for right and for wrong, as a health and safety issue. And people take health and safety very, very seriously, and they get quite emotional. There's a lot of people that petition their strata councils for that kind of support and are absolutely vigilant in the use of other people, or the improper use of other people of those cooking tools.
What else is on that table of hot points, flash points, possible points of conflict?
Well, I would say that in this day and age, it's probably the vacation rental by owner and Airbnb world. People using units as rentals that either aren't zoned, don't have business licenses, and they're certainly catching a lot of flack from their neighbors who are living next to a barrage of tourists.
As a matter of fact, I've seen where a strata manager changed the locks on the doors of a unit. That the owner had been running it as an Airbnb, and the owner of the unit who was running it, his unit as an Airbnb, refused to quit doing it, and so the strata manager went in and changed the locks on the door.
Probably a little aggressive, but quite practical, I would say. I haven't heard that one, but makes good sense.
When I saw the story, I was actually going to send it to you, and I wish now I'll try and do a search for it because it was quite fascinating, and it actually made its way into the courts because the manager of the strata organization basically said, "I have a duty to all of those who live in this building." And the individual who owned the Airbnb suite refused to comply with the strata bylaws. And I thought it was quite fascinating that somebody would, to use your word, be that aggressive. We're taking your calls. We're talking about stratas. If you live in one, if you've got a challenge, never a better opportunity than to connect with Dylan Switzer at FH&P Lawyers. Within the context of that organization, he handles most of the strata files or much of the strata business or much of the litigation that takes place, and ideal guy to talk to. We'll take your calls at 250-862-2525. Bob, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
About 2 years ago or so, we moved into a strata, and things weren't too bad. Then the unit above us became available, and the people that moved into there, the fella is very noisy, stomping up and down on the floor.
You mean he wears hobnail logger boots to bed at night?
It sounds like it. It got to the point that he makes the dishes rattle down here, and
so you're wondering if there's anything you can do about that?
Yeah, is there anything I can do? I've talked to him. He says, twice I've talked to him, and he says, oh yeah, he says, I know I got a heavy foot, but
okay.
I've had a council member go and talk to him. So what else can I do?
Well, you started things off the right way, and it's good that you've got council involved. One of the things that, it sounds a bit like overkill, but it's the right way to go, is to talk to your council about finding the guy for, basically a noise complaint. Your bylaws are likely going to have something saying that you have quiet time or respectful hours, and if he can't abide by those, then he needs to be handled accordingly by the Strata Corporation.
I see.
Bob, I don't know if it's in your budget, but what I would do is buy him the nicest pair of slippers that I could find. I would gift wrap those slippers, and I'd put a smile on this guy's face and say, listen, you know what? You've admitted to me that you have a heavy foot, and you know what it must be like for us to live underneath you. So we just thought we'd give you this gift of these beautiful slippers in the process of relationship building and making ourselves better neighbors. He'd probably laugh, and he'd leave those slippers by the door, and I bet he'd put them on every night when he came home.
Well, I don't know. He seems to be here all the time.
So obviously this did not touch your funny bone and doesn't seem to make any sense.
Well, when you're on limited budget, it's...
Yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying. Listen, talk to your Strata, as Dylan Switzer just suggested. Let's see what you can get in some sort of a letter that is officially written by your Strata manager, and then let us know what has happened since, okay?
Okay.
All right, I appreciate your time. Patty, you're going to be first up when we come back. Dylan Switzer is in our studio taking calls to those of you who live within a strata, who have strata challenges. This is sort of like the doctor is in, but he deals with property challenges and interpersonal relationships, because that's what we're really talking about, is opposing neighbors' views of a certain scenario. Patty, you're first up. We're going to be back in a moment. Dylan Switzer in studios from FH&P in these days when everybody is snapping up real estate, when it seems that no matter what the project is that as it comes to market, whether it is in the downtown urban area or whether it is the side hills, absolutely, strated properties are being deemed as highly desirable. So we're taking your calls about new properties, new stratas, or old for that matter. Patty, good morning.
Good morning. I have a question about a charge to my property at the strata. My car was stolen from the senior center, and my car keys were in my pocket. And the strata has charged me for rekeying the building, quoting bylaw 11.1. I understand Section 72 of the Strata Property Act, or the regulations, say that legislature has not identified any common property, and I was wondering if this is a legal charge or if the regulations have been changed.
Patty, I'd have to see your bylaw to really comment on that, but just to ask you a question, was your building a fobbed building or was it a mechanical key? So at your front...
It's mechanical key.
A mechanical key. Yeah, that in those circumstances, it is more common to have bylaws that do require a rekeying and an issuance of the keys. Have they indicated how, like, you don't have to tell a number, but do you have an insurance policy for your strata that covers from any claims from the Strata Corporation against you?
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to give your insurance agent a call, figure out what the deductible is and what it might do to your premiums. But if if that bylaw is legitimate, which it very well could be, you might have coverage there at a minor deductible that makes it a bit more financially worthwhile for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you comment on the regulations remaining silent regarding identifying common property and an owner's responsibility to repair it?
That's still very much a rule if you're found to be at fault for it. But that's not really the example that we're using here. What we're stuck with more is the bylaw that governs your ownership. You know, the repairing of common property is usually more obvious things. If you tore up a lawn or a sign, or you spilled something in the hallway or things like that, it's not necessarily a safety precaution. So I think in your circumstances, we are stuck a bit more with the language of the bylaw that I think you said bylaw 11.
So, Patty, just so I understand this, is that your vehicle was stolen
from the senior center? Yeah.
Okay, it's immaterial where it was stolen from. Yeah. The reality is it was stolen, and your keys were in the vehicle at the time.
No, the keys were in my jacket pocket inside the building.
Okay. So then as the vehicle was stolen, they've now determined that all of the units in the building are going to have to be rekeyed with a new master key, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you are going to be expected to pay that charge.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And the bylaw states that they can claim damages for the owner who's held responsible at law, but if I didn't personally lose the keys, how can I be held responsible?
So are you saying that your bylaw doesn't actually mention keys specifically, and it does
not, no.
Okay, well that's certainly a more interesting conversation then, because you haven't really caused any damage to the building, and they're taking a precautionary step, which might be prudent, but might not be born from the bylaws themselves. So I wouldn't just cave in on that one quite yet.
Okay, well, thank you so very much.
Listen, Patty, if you want to know more, Dylan Switzer is available at FH&P. You may want to call him up and spend a couple of minutes across the desk from him. They are at 400 or 275 Lawrence Avenue. His direct line is 869-6029. That's 869-6029. So you could have a more in-depth conversation. So then let me ask you this, Dylan. I left my vehicle in the parking lot this morning. I have my keys in my pocket. I'm seeing an increasing number of stories about people that somehow managed to use a computer to effectively somehow dial into the brain of the fob and open up the car door and then figure out how to start the vehicle and drive off. In my vehicle, I have left the fob for my building. So if somebody drives off with that vehicle with the fob for my building in it, can the building come back against me and ask me to effectively refob the entire building?
Not really, unless the bylaws provide for it. But you used a key word there, which was different than Patty's situation, in that you have a fob.
Yes.
And typically your strata manager or somebody in your council would have access to the computer, which would allow them to sort of reprogram the fobs to change or to kill the one that is missing.
Superior to a key.
Absolutely. If you're in a building with more than a few units, and if you have the budget for it, they're not without their challenges, but the fob's the way to go. It really does prevent these types of issues on the same scale anyway.
Okay. Fascinating, because as I was listening, I'm thinking, holy my God, the building I live in is 57 units, and if my fob is stolen, and does it come back on me that I've got to provide 56 more fobs in addition to mine that is missing? But you've just given me relief to know that it's more about programming a computer than it is about replacing the fob.
And in situations like that, it does seem a bit like it's salt in the wound if your vehicle has been stolen and you're dealing with all those hassles to then have an extra bill as well.
Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely. Back to the phones. Dave, good morning.
Good morning, Phil. Good morning, Dylan.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
With the, it was a little taking me off track a bit, but the fobs, I mean, our remotes, you're not supposed to keep your remotes in your cars. And if your remote is stolen or lost, we just reprogram all the remotes to the same code, so that's not a real big deal. But It would be nice if you differentiated between what's a bylaw and what's a fire department bylaw, and I'm talking about the barbecues. Many of us don't have a choice.
And in which way? Which ones you follow?
Well, the fire department is the one who denotes that we can't have barbecues on our sun decks. In some instances, it's not the Strata Council who decides this. It's the fire department,
depending on the age of the building, I believe, and if there's no sprinklers,
and also the clearance involved.
Yeah, that's right, and whether it's an enclosed space and
so
and
you know, it'd be nice if you would have differentiated that earlier, because we on Strata have enough trouble trying to keep our own bylaws and the exterior bylaws like the Strata Property Act, which is the provincial legislation that runs all Strata properties.
Well, for good and for bad, it definitely is a world of regulation that we live in.
Yeah, it's true.
When we have outside sources, whether it's City of Kelowna or West Kelowna or wherever you might live, whether you have ordinances from the fire department, those must be followed no matter what, because it's very rare that you can what we call contract out of that. Those are what govern you. Now, what we also have in lots of buildings and strata complexes around town is a strata making a decision to go over and above or further to what is required, say, by the fire department or the city for such issues. And in those cases, that's after a 3/4 vote of the owners and something that the strata can impose itself. And typically, the strata only enforces those bylaws that it has enacted itself.
Exactly. And I just recommend if a person is buying into a strata situation, read the bylaws and the package before you buy.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. Your words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate. Because as a matter of fact, I need to take a break. But just the dot on the I. I can remember when then I can't actually. I think it was Jerry Zimmerman who was the fire chief of the day, appearing before Kelowna Council and talking about the number of apartment fires and the number of apartment fires that had been started by smoking, with the improper disposal of cigarette butts on a balcony, and then the secondary source was barbecues. The two leading causes of strata fires in this community.
Oh, it's absolutely, and it's always been a sore spot for me when I've been involved in my personal strata or professionally, because personally I have a bias towards barbecues. I love to cook on them. I enjoy them. I don't charbroil my steaks. Minimal smoke.
Yep.
And I'd like to see a framework where a building can have barbecues that are safe and usable. I don't always think that a blanket ban is the right way to go, but lots of owners feel that way, and you've got to respect those wishes.
Or even if it was electric versus a propane or natural gas barbecue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, yeah. Because I think that the electric barbecue is, from a threat point of view or from a danger point of view, is way, way, way down there on the scale.
Yeah, that's my understanding, too.
Absolutely. Dylan Switzer is here. I've got one call waiting on hold, but, caller, I need to take a break. Are you okay to take a couple more calls, or are you going to bolt? Okay.
No, I can take some calls.
Mr. Switzer is here, dispensing free legal advice relative to Stratas condos purchase, and with so many people migrating from the coast as real estate refugees, there is demand for strated and strated properties. We're going to be back in a moment with Dylan Switzer. We'll take your calls at 250-862-2525. Been a while since we've had Dylan Switzer in our studios. He is the condo strata specialist at FH&P. He handles other files as well, but for whatever reason, many of these files that deal with stratas and strata challenges fall to his desk. Been a long time since we've had him in studio, and I appreciate the fact that he can give us a little more time. Back to the phones. Bob, good morning.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. Just a quick question in regards to what protection does a strata have in regards to their property manager who has total control of writing checks out of your accounts? What is stopping them from, say, draining your contingency fund or?
Well, beyond a keen eye, not very much. They are people that you've appointed or elected as a council, and the council's been elected by the owners. Now, their job depends on it. Obviously they get caught in the cookie jar once and their career is over for a variety of reasons. They're probably going to jail. But having said that, I do think it is imperative that the members of council especially do look at and require that the strata manager provide copies of receipts, in and out balances, the monthly financials, actual bank statements, and occasionally, if there's any suspicion at all, independently verify it. You can go to the bank if you're a member of council and say, hey, I want to see the balance in our contingency fund.
Okay, and what in case of receivership for the management company?
In which way?
Well, if they go into receivership, can they, did they have to put up a bond or like some kind of a, I'm not sure what their requirements are as far as.
Yeah, actually, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if they're bonded either. They could be because they do operate with money, but they're not trust accounts. So I don't know that they actually would be bonded. If you want to flip me an email or leave me a voicemail, I can certainly look into that because that is something that I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
The corporation, of course, as long as they have some assets, would be liable. If you got really into the nuts and bolts of it, you would have a bunch of payments coming from other management companies in town, from other stratas, that you would be able to get an assignment of those fees if you were to get a judgment. But that's pretty unlikely. I think that if you stick to a couple of the big operations in town, you're going to be well serviced and well handled in that regard.
Okay. Great.
Bob, if you're interested in contacting Dylan, it's D. Switzer. That's SWITZER, D. Switzer at FHPlawyers.com. And as you say, or as he says, he's not sure of the answer, and if you'd like to send him an email, he'd be sure to get back to you.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Calls to 250-862-2525 in conversation with Dylan Switzer on this Tuesday morning. Every Tuesday morning, Law Talk with FH&P Lawyers. It's been a long time since we've had a chance to talk about the purchase of a property, but more to the point, the right property. More to the point, do you really want to buy that strata unit in a building without looking at the books, the minutes, the documents, and the bank accounts, and what is the contingency?
The contingency fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the big decisions that you have to make, right? Especially if you're buying a brand new build. Obviously, there's not going to be much of a contingency there, and in theory, you shouldn't be too alarmed. There's going to be the new home warranty insurance, and you're going to have a new build, which, as long as it was done properly, you're going to be safe. If you're buying a building, especially one that's older than 10 years, when you have run out of the important new home warranty, then you do want to make sure that you have a healthy contingency. Or if it's not healthy, you want to ensure that it's been recently used to cover off some big ticket items like a roof upgrade or boilers and things like that. So you might be off the hook for a while.
Back in a moment with Dylan Switzer. FH&P will take your calls right after this break. Flashpoints, the challenges of buying into a strata. And as you heard Dylan Switzer a moment ago, be it an older building where maybe the new home warranty is expired, or buying a new build in a new property where effectively there aren't any challenges because everything is new and everything seems to be tickety-boo and coming under the protection of the new home. What is it's a new home warranty, really?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
Yeah. Don't make me break it all down, but basically get different coverages for different things in 2 years, 5 years, and 10-year increments.
Right. So that's where you, as Dave said, that's where you really want to be reading the bylaws. You want to be reading the minutes of the meetings. You really want, and the minutes of the meetings are almost more important than the bylaws, are they not?
Well, they're
only because it shows you what's going on.
Yeah, if you're looking to buy a place, obviously you want to look at both. The bylaws, you want to make sure that you can live with them, but the minutes, that's really where the juicy stuff is, or hopefully isn't. But you'll have an idea if something's failing in the building. You'll know if you're moving into a unit that has neighbors that are basically frat house boys. You will have a sense from that because the minutes will pick that up, and that will give you an opportunity to make an educated decision. You could be walking into a big bill. They could be weeks away or months away from digging everybody $5 or $10,000 to do a building envelope. Who knows? And you don't want to necessarily throw your name in with that lot.
Has construction improved? I went through a horror show at the coast where, within the context of the leaky condo building at the coast that cost me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and I could not afford the cash calls, ultimately had to borrow $10,000 to pay somebody to buy the unit off of me. the new building laws and the new strata laws and the new construction standards and regulations, are the buildings a whole lot better today?
Well, my dad's a carpenter, and he's probably ashamed by my level of handiness, but there seems to be more good builds. I think in boom times you will see that the double checking in people like the city and things like that, they're probably stretched a bit more, but they seem to be doing a good, thorough job. People want to do good work. They're
making sure things are to code and the bylaws are being upheld.
Yeah, we're not seeing many code issues these days at all. People are, the odd developer is going to cut some corners, but I think most new construction is pretty solid these days.
All right. Any other flashpoint? You brought in some pages of notes. We've got about 3-4 minutes to go. Any other flashpoints that you can think of that we might want to touch on before we say goodbye?
No, just to highlight a couple of things that we went over. It sounds very boring, and it probably is. But if you are buying into these places, there's stratas that can be a good fit for a lot of people. Just really do make sure you do the due diligence. Look at your minutes. Look at your bylaws. And that goes back to what I talked about at the beginning. The rules, they're there for a reason. Sometimes they're poorly drafted. Sometimes they're fixing problems that aren't there. But you have to ask yourself honestly whether you can live with those bylaws. You might love pets, and there might be a dog restriction. You might love to smoke, and there might be a smoking outdoor prohibition. Just make sure you're buying the right place.
And if you have challenges, then you go back to who? Your real estate agent for clarification, or you contact the strata manager for clarification. Who before you've ever signed on the dotted line, who becomes the validation or the source of additional information?
Yeah, and that's actually a good point, because right now with our real estate market just being absolutely frenzied in all segments, there's a tendency for people to rush deals through because they feel like that's competitive bids, so that means they can't do their due diligence. Take a breath, do your due diligence. You can sign the dotted line and you can sign an offer. Just make sure your realtor, as most good realtors will do, will have a subject condition in there that gives you the opportunity to review the depreciation reports, the minutes, the bylaws, the financials, and then you can sit down with, your favorite sin, read through it, and make sure you are happy with what you're buying. And if you are unclear, talk to your lawyer, talk to your realtor, and perhaps talk to the Strata Council.
So just for clarity, and I love how you put that in, and it's unfortunate that we're almost at the end of the show, but if you feel pressured, go ahead and sign the deal, but make sure those magical words subject to are included. It's subject to that's the magic.
That's right. That gets your bid in. If it's like we're seeing, especially in townhomes now, we're seeing lots of competitive bids, and you have to act fast if it's a place that you love, but you have to act smart as well. So you can get your bid in, you can put that price in, you can sign the dotted line, but give yourself that 7 to 14 days to get all the documents that you need. Have a read of it and make sure you understand what you're getting into.
And if your agent says, "Oh no, we got to move forward on this," the reality is that if you don't like what you find in those strata documents, and you walk away, they're going to have no trouble finding people in this kind of a market. Yeah. They're going to have no trouble finding other people who want to step into your place.
Yeah, and buying a place is likely going to be one of the biggest decisions and purchases of your life. There's no reason to sign it just because you feel bad about the vendor or you feel bad about your realtor who's showing you 10 places and you're being picky. You're allowed to be picky. Make sure you're happy with what you're buying. Make sure you understand what you're getting.
Because they're going to be well paid when they get their commission once the deal is done and your dollars have been transferred over to the owner of the strata and it's become your property and you have the title. There's a nice whack of that cash that's going to go to the real estate agent. You don't need to feel guilty at all.
No, that's right. And you know what? The good realtors, they want to make sure you're in the right property. They want to make sure you know what you're getting and you're happy with it because you're going to use them again and you're going to tell all your friends to use them too. So take your time.
All right. And that's a good point as well. One happy customer creates another happy customer. One dissatisfied customer creates 15 real bad horror stories that are circulating in the market.
You got her.
All right. What does the rest of the summer look like for you?
More of the same. It's going to...
crazy market, crazy times.
Crazy market, crazy times. Enjoying every minute of it.
Yeah, there was a time when you used to be able to go on exotic vacations. You used to go cycling. You used to go canoeing. You used to go river rafting. And no longer. You're not leaving town.
The good old days.
There you go. The good old days. Dylan Switzer can be found at FH&P at 275 Lawrence Avenue. I can see their building from here through our studio lines. Studio window, and his direct line is 869-6029. Good guy to know if you've got some strata challenges. Certainly, there's all kinds of things that we haven't aired here today. A couple of times he's been a source of invaluable, sober second thought, to which I've always thanked him for the time that we've spent in our studio. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Phil.
All right, thank you so much. We're about done. I want to thank you for your ears at the other end of the radio, your calls that come in. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Where will you be?